It is an honor and a privilege for me to welcome you to online church, to our church family and our friends tuning in through our various platforms. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. A special shout out to our Revere location as we celebrate our 2-year anniversary this coming Wednesday. On behalf of my wife, Emily, and myself, we have been deeply missing you, and we cannot wait to be together again. I want to personally thank everyone who has supported us through prayer and encouragement and giving and serving over the last 2 years. We would not be able to advance the mission in Revere without your contribution. Please remember that after this service, we would love to have you join us for a Zoom call. We'll be providing the details at the end of this message. Finally, a very important update on Pastor Kurt. We're thankful to inform you that his surgery was successful and he is at home recovering as we speak. And he sends his greetings and wants to thank each and every one of you for your love and your prayers during this time. In this message series, we've been talking about stories that Jesus told. Stories with hidden messages that cause us to investigate, to dig deeper, and to ask, what in the world is Jesus talking about? Now, if you've ever felt that way when reading the Bible, welcome to the club. Trust me, you're not alone. Today we're breaking down one of the classic stories that Jesus told, the parable of the lost sheep. We find it in Luke 15, 1 through 7. It says that tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. This made the Pharisees and teachers of religious law complain that he was associating with such sinful people, even eating with them. So Jesus told them this story. If a man has 100 sheep and one of them gets lost, what will he do? Won't he leave the 99 others in the wilderness and go to search for the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he will joyfully carry it home on his shoulders. When he arrives, he will call together his friends and neighbors, saying, "Rejoice with me, because I have found my lost sheep." In the same way, there is more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away. So, what's going on here? Is Jesus wanting to give us some farming tips? Why is he talking about sheep? Oh, and by the way, for those of you city dwellers in quarantine, this is what a sheep looks like. Jesus is telling this story in response to complaints from the religious leaders of the time. They can't figure out why Jesus loves hanging out with notorious sinners. And friends, by the way, nothing has changed. In 2,000 years, Jesus still loves hanging out with notorious sinners. It is not an inconvenience to him. It is his favorite thing to do. There is something about Jesus that draws in those who are brokenhearted, those who are outcasts, misfits, and outlaws. There are 3 key ideas that I want to unpack from this story. The first is the lost sheep. Jesus paints a scenario that his listeners would have immediately understood. Shepherds and sheep were a common sight in that part of the world, even to this day. Sheep would have been a valuable source of skins and wool and dairy and meat. Losing a sheep was a devastating blow to a shepherd, one that his entire community would have heard about. But when I read the story, and as I read it carefully, I wondered, how did the sheep wander off? Did he have a plan for a great escape? Was it an accident? Which led me to a similar question. How do people end up lost? How do people end up lost and far from God? Well, Isaiah 53:6 gives us a clue. It says, "All of us, like sheep, have strayed away. We have left God's path to follow our own." It turns out we have a lot in common with sheep. Mainly our propensity to stray away. I find it interesting that the Bible tells us that the reason we leave God's paths is to follow our own. And friends, you know this is true. You know this is true because our entire culture is built on the idea of following our own path. Just follow your own path. Our culture's attitude, in a nutshell, is I'm going to do what I want, with whoever I want, whenever I want, and don't you dare tell me that I can't. So, we write our own rule book. We follow our own understanding. Other times, we are lured into creating our own worldviews. This happens so subtly that if we're not paying attention, it's hard to detect. It's very, very sneaky. But let me give you an example. One of the things I love doing on my downtime is learning. I enjoy listening to podcasts and different thought leaders. And I was sitting at home one day watching an interview where this famous life guru was sharing his wisdom. He was sharing his wisdom about fulfillment, and he went on to say that the key to having an extraordinary and meaningful life, and at this point I'm paying attention, that the key to having an extraordinary and meaningful life is to live life on your terms. That is the key, to live life on your terms and nobody else's. As soon as I heard that, I sensed the Holy Spirit gently saying to me, that is a demonic thought. Meaning, that is an idea cleverly crafted to lure people away from God. But it sounds so good. How can it be bad? Friends, there are tons of man-made ideas and fancy thought systems out there that can derail us. That's why Proverbs 14:12 says, there is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way to death. Many times we can follow ideas that seem right in the moment. They sound so good in the moment without realizing where that road will lead us. Other times, it's the people closest to us who can lead us astray. Sometimes we think we're following Jesus, but in reality, we're just following a friend, or a relationship, or a tradition, or a status. Sometimes we're really just responding to peer pressure and family expectations, but we're not really following Jesus. It's like this. I don't know if this ever happened to you as a kid. It happened to me a lot, but say you're following your parents around at a crowded mall. Yes, back before the virus. And your dad has on jeans and a black shirt. He has on jeans and a black shirt. But you're so distracted looking at all the displays, thinking about the food court or about that new toy you really want, that you start following some random stranger who also happens to be wearing jeans and a black shirt. And you don't even notice. You just keep following along. You are following until you go to ask your dad for something and realize, oh, you're not my dad. Awkward. Friends, it is so important to make sure we know who we are really following. When Jesus spent time with notorious sinners, he saw people like you and I who have a propensity to be misguided. The lost sheep in the story represents our human propensity to choose paths that lead us away from God. So my question for you today is, where is your path taking you? That road of life you are currently on, is it bringing you closer to Jesus, or is it leading you away from Jesus? We pick up the reading again in Luke 15:4. It says, if a man has 100 sheep and one of them gets lost, what will he do? Won't he leave the 99 others in the wilderness and go to search for the one that is lost until he finds it? The second idea I want us to look at is the shepherd. There is a shepherd in the story. As soon as he realized that his sheep was gone, he went on a search. But as I read this, I wondered, how did this man know that his sheep was missing? When did he notice that there was only 99? And the other 99 sheep, I wonder, because I have a wild imagination, I wonder if any of them noticed that the other one was missing, that one of their own was gone. I wonder, I can picture all of these sheep, and I wonder if they were just, chewing away on some grass back at the pen, and then in their own sheep language, which they have, one of the sheep says to all the other sheep, it's awfully quiet around here today. Have you guys seen Lammy? And Lammy is gone. I just wonder if anybody else noticed that something was different. One of my favorite things about East Coast International Church is that we continually strive to be the kind of church where every person knows they are valuable. From our staff to our ministry leaders to our volunteers, we're constantly asking variants of the question, who should be here that isn't here? Who should be here that isn't here? Who are we missing? Who has been disconnected? But the reason we ask questions like this is because we know what it's like to be the lost sheep. We know what it's like to be rescued, to be given a second chance. I'm so thankful that when I was lost, Jesus didn't stop searching. How many of you can type amen to that, right? And somebody was willing to ask these questions about me. Friends, if Jesus is willing to work with me and give me a second chance, if he's willing to work with you and give you a second chance, he's willing to work with anybody. This deep, deep understanding of what it's like to be given a second chance leads us to ask other questions. Who haven't we reached that we need to be reaching? And how can we share our faith in compelling and compassionate ways with our friends and our neighbors? And how can we send world outreach partners to the nations to reach those who have never heard even a single message about Jesus? Because if we're not even aware that people are missing, how can we search for them? How can we reach them? Now, think for a moment. When was the last time you lost your wallet, your keys, or your phone? Now, right next to me, I have my wallet. I have an ACIC pin, which they're everywhere. I don't know if you've noticed this. My wallet, my keys, and my phone, right? These are items that are very important to me. They help me deal with life in many ways. But listen, if I lost any of these items, I would be in serious trouble. However, eventually, I could replace them. And eventually, I would forget about them. Now, let me ask you this. When was the last time you lost something that was irreplaceable? When was the last time? A few summers ago, my wife and I decided to spend an evening at an oceanside park with some young adults from our church. We played games, and we laughed, and we took in a spectacular sunset. We made some great memories. By the time we said our goodbyes, it was dark, and everyone headed home. We got home that night exhausted, but excited, still raving about the day's events, when all of a sudden, my wife realized that something on her was missing. It was a very important piece of jewelry, something irreplaceable because of its sentimental value. It was her engagement ring. The ring she always wore along with her wedding ring. Immediately, we started panicking, and we thought, where was the last place you saw it? When was the last time you took it off? Suddenly, my wife recalled that during a game at the park, she'd briefly taken off the ring but didn't remember putting it back on. So what did we do? We went on a search. We jumped in the car and drove back to the park, which was in another city. There was an underlying angst the entire ride over. We were expecting the best, but preparing for the worst. We tried to stay positive and say, well, it's not that big of a deal. It's just a ring. but we were both thinking about the memories attached to the ring as we drove. I thought about how God had miraculously provided that ring for us when we couldn't afford one. I thought about how I'd proposed to my wife with that ring and the look on her face when she saw it for the first time. I thought about how beautiful she looked when she wore it. I thought about the season of life we were in when we got it. And at this point, we arrived back at the park. We took some flashlights and frantically retraced our step inch by inch, all the way back to where we had been earlier. Finally, after an intense and unsettling search, we saw something shining in the grass. It was the ring, still laying there intact. We had found our missing ring. We were beyond excited. We were deeply thankful. Friends, I want to tell you today, in case no one ever has, that you are one of a kind. Now tell the person next to you, you are one of a kind. And if you're by yourself, type it in the chat. You are one of a kind. Friends, you are irreplaceable. And maybe you don't feel special because you think nobody sees you. But I'm here to tell you, God sees you, and He knows what you've been through. And even when you've taken wrong turns and ended up lost and confused, Jesus doesn't just move on with His day. No, He goes right to work. He goes on a search. He leaves everything behind and gives all of His attention to finding His lost sheep. And what happens once the shepherd finds the missing sheep? Well, in Luke 15:5, it says that when he has found it, he will joyfully carry it home on his shoulders. When he arrives, he will call together his friends and neighbors, saying, "Rejoice with me, because I have found my lost sheep." In the same way, there is more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away. The last idea that I want to zero on today is coming home. It says that when Jesus finds the sheep he's been looking for, the very first thing that he does is he joyfully carries it home on his shoulders. Joyfully. It doesn't say that he begrudgingly carries the sheep. It doesn't say that he will angrily drag the sheep behind him, but he will joyfully carry it home on his shoulders. Now, for some of you today, the main thing that has been keeping you from moving forward is that you won't allow Jesus to carry you home. You are kicking and screaming. And maybe you've been kicking and screaming for a long time. And today, Jesus would say to you, just let me carry you home. Let me carry you home. Friends, let Jesus carry you home. You have been following your own path, trying all kinds of tricks and schemes. You have tried to sort out this chaos on your own, and you've tried to deal with that situation on your own, and you've tried carrying that burden all by yourself. Now, just allow Jesus to carry you home. Because friends, when Jesus carries you home, there are no lectures, there are no shoulda, coulda, wouldas, there's no I told you so's, there's no labeling of the black sheep, there's no sheep gossip. There's only celebration when you are welcomed home. You are restored, you are loved, you are forgiven. And in case you're wondering what this process of coming home looks like, let's watch this together.
The Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals in Australia rescued a sheep on Tuesday after he had been abandoned from his herd and human contact for more than 5 years. His merino wool was incredibly overgrown, and the organization was concerned about serious infections under the massive amounts of wool. The CEO of the RSPCA posted on Twitter looking for a shearer to help the animal, now named Chris. Four-time Australian shearing champion winner Ian Elkin stepped up and began freeing the animal from his wool on Thursday.
The sheep was mildly sedated, so it made it comfortable, and then we sort of had to break it open and shear the fleece off in a couple of layers because the weight of the fleece was pulling against the skin, so we wanted to keep the skin cuts to an absolute minimum.
They weighed the wool after shaving it, and it was a new unofficial world record of 42 kilograms or 80 pounds. Chris looked completely unrecognizable without all that wool, but he's doing great.
I think he's a new man, and not only half the size, but his personality's already changed. Yesterday he was hiding in the corner. He didn't want to have any contact whatsoever. He could barely stand up, and he certainly couldn't walk very well. And today, when I looked at him, he was coming up to you. He wanted to be pat.
Chris will be observed for a few days and then will be available for adoption.
This man called together his friends and neighbors, saying, "Rejoice with me, because I have found my lost sheep." Rejoice with me. Friends, to align our hearts with heaven's priorities is to rejoice with Jesus when the lost sheep is found. This fills the heart of God. This is what causes heaven to go insane. There is more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away. Today, if you're watching this and you're thinking to yourself, "That's me, I'm the lost sheep. I need Jesus to carry me home." In a moment, I'm going to pray for you. But right now, I want to invite you to very simply respond. Find a way to let us know that you are taking a step forward, whether it's by requesting prayer or by filling out a communication card or by sending us a private message or a text. Our staff is on standby. We would love to pray for you. Whatever you have to do, my point is, don't let this opportunity pass you by. Ezekiel 34:16 says, "I will search for my lost ones who have strayed away, and I will bring them safely home again. I will bandage the injured and strengthen the weak." Ultimately, what Jesus wants to do is to bring healing and freedom, not just to the circumstance you're facing, but to every area of your life. And all it takes is for you to say yes. For you to say yes to two things: accepting His forgiveness. This is asking Him to forgive you for the path that you have been on. And secondly, accepting His leadership. This is allowing Jesus to carry you home, allowing Him to lead your life. Will you do that?